Welcome to episode 238 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Zack Klima from Wait Time about helping sports venues be about watching sports and not waiting in line.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is looking forward to hosting your next digital upfronts, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan. Don't know what digital upfronts are? Well, stay tuned. I'm going to tell you what they are. But first, thank you for listening. You might find this podcast on sportsgeekhq.com, or you can find it on iTunes, or now it's called Apple Podcasts. They've abandoned iTunes. It doesn't even exist anymore. Or you can find it on my favourite podcast platform, Pocket Casts, or you can get it each week via the newsletter, Sports Geek News. And don't forget, as a listener, you have the opportunity to join Sports Geek Nation via the special link that's only available. I don't put it in the show notes. It's now, right now, is where you've got to grab a pen to write it down, sportsgeeknation.com/connected. And you can sign up and join our trivia community with Ask Me Anything sessions happening every week. But as always, you can get in touch with me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, at Sean Callanan on most social platforms, or at SportsGeek on most social platforms. Thanks again to the people who reach out, you, my listeners, who reach out to my guests. It is absolutely awesome to get feedback from guests like Jeremy LaLiga, Shannon Gove, Luke McCoy, saying listeners like yourself have reached out. So keep being awesome. Keep reaching out to my listeners, including today's guest, Zack Klima. Reach out to them via LinkedIn. The links are always in the show notes, which is sportsgeekhq.com/238. It's the episode that you are listening to. Before we get into the episode with Zack, I was talking about digital upfronts. Digital upfronts is actually a byproduct of what we've been doing with the digital to dollars process. After working through with a team or a league or a rights holder, helping them understand their audience, their content, their distribution, understanding their value, figuring out what their rate card looks like, and then developing pitches for what they want to push to sponsors, they then know what they're going to sell. And so a digital upfront is very similar to what TV stations do at the start of every year. It's used to prime all their advertisers. What are going to be their hit shows? Where do you want to put your ads if you want to be talking to their audiences? So digital upfronts is the same thing. Gets you to showcase your audiences you're going to talk to, the content franchises you're going to develop throughout the year, and then what audiences they are going to engage with, and then how you're going to use new platforms. How are you going to use Instagram in the upcoming year? Why would sponsors want to integrate with that? Are you going to tackle new platforms like TikTok and the like? And why would sponsors want to engage on those platforms? So digital upfronts are a really good way to both educate your audience of what's available and how your audience operates and engages on your different platforms, but also showcasing some of the content items that maybe you've developed, your fans love, and you actually haven't told your sponsors about them. So the way that I normally work is I can give a little bit of a spiel on latest digital trends and what's happening around the world and some best practice. And then guess what we do? We just sprinkle a little bit of your content and some of your audiences and some of the great work that your digital teams are doing into that presentation to get them all riled up and ready to activate via digital. So if you do want to know more about Digital to Dollars, go to digitaltodollars.com or simply send me an email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. And we can chat from there. This week's guest is a good friend of mine, Zack Klima from Wait Time. I've known him for a long time through the Seat community. I was lucky enough to catch up with him when I was in Detroit to catch a game at the Palace of Auburn Hills before they shut the doors there with my beloved Pistons. So I hope you enjoy my chat with Zack Klima from Wait Time on his startup story. Very happy to welcome Zack Klima from Wait Time. He's the founder and CEO of Wait Time. Welcome to the podcast, Zack.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we've I think the last time, one of the last times we caught up was in your hometown of Detroit when I was lucky enough to head out to the Palace of Auburn Hills to catch one more Pistons game before they shut the Palace. As a big Pistons man myself, you're from Detroit. Do you want to give us a little bit of the Wait Time origin story, because it does start out that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So, originally I'm an architect by schooling. And
Yep.
so, once that I understood that wasn't my vocation and my passion, I started to go into architectural sales where Detroit was being brought back to life and gentrified. And so I had met a guy named Dan Gilbert, who's
Yep.
the owner of the Cavaliers.
Yep.
And so when I met him, I had the idea for wait time, and I was able to pitch it to him. And he liked the idea so much that he put me into his business accelerator called Bizdom in Detroit.
Okay.
So kind of like his version of Shark Tank. And so one thing led to another. I linked up with some of the top technology experts in the world, John Mars, who's actually now my CTO. And so our first client was the Detroit Pistons, where we birthed wait time out of a real arena. And so when we went in there, it was we didn't have any technology built, but we had the expert team in place to do so.
Yep.
And so when we did that, we built the technology rather fast and relentlessly, event after event. And after, I would say, a full season of being in there, we were able to take the product to market and commercialize it.
So before we get into it, because what we haven't done is go through that initial pitch. What was the product? What was the thing the problem you were solving, and what were you trying to fix?
Yeah, so the light bulb moment for me was I was in line at a Red Wings game when a game-winning goal happened. And so I was pretty mad about it because I had spent all the money I had at the time to buy a playoff ticket. And so I said, the cliche, there must be a better way.
Yep.
And so my original idea was, what if you could put wait times in the hands of all fans event after event on a mobile device?
Yep.
So that was my original idea, was at your seat, can you know what the wait times are in real time?
In all the lines of concessions, of toilet facilities, all of those kind of things. How long is it going to take me to get from my seat to go get a beer, get a burger, those kind of things?
That is correct. Yeah. So basically restrooms, concessions, and retail. That is correct.
And so putting together your team, people like John, what were some of the early what was your MVP like around tech and trying to report that, I guess, line movement? Again, you've probably created your own terms, but what was the early version looking like to sort of prove that, hey, we can show that we're moving foot traffic from one vendor to another vendor because there's less people there?
No, that's a great question, and that's quite the journey story. So what we did initially was, the way that we do this is we mount cameras. These are off-the-shelf cameras above every line that is desired to be measured. So concession lines, restroom lines, retail. And what we did was, it was in 3 stages. So the first stage from a MVP was, we mounted the cameras above every line, and we were able to build the artificial intelligence that is now patented. We were able to build it based off of real movement of people. So once we proved that, we said, okay, we have great data based off of the movement science of people. Now it's time to distribute this data to the fans. And so initially what we did was, we proved to ourselves and we proved to the Pistons that we could actually measure real-time movement science of people. So that was the initial product that we were able to prove out from the start.
And so even that type of, so some of the early findings of that, and I remember, I think you were telling a story when I was at the Pistons talking to some people of just moving bollards and the entry points into lines where people would come out of a restroom and turn right and like accidentally end up in a line, and then they'd have to turn around and come back. And so it was just like moving it to not completely adjacent to the exit, but facing outward would stop like just people accidentally ending up in lines and causing more congestion in the lines, those kind of things. So they were some of the initial like early findings.
Absolutely. So what we did with, we learned all kinds of different things in terms of, we call it the crowd science behavior.
Yep.
So a lot of these venues don't know what's happening in their lines, because what else could they do to measure it before in the past? So we were able to identify, exactly to your point, we were seeing that stanchions, the entrance to stanchions they were catching people in lines, and they had no idea they were in line because it was with the flow of people. And so they were in lines and they had no idea they were in it. And then they were falling out of line. So even as granular as that, we were able to identify so many deficiencies in operations that was actually the catalyst to go fan facing. The fans are the problem, as
Yep.
we were able to identify. And so we needed to make those fans part of the solution. So that's what really helped become the impetus to do so.
And so you've got cameras in place and AI. And so then what was the next steps to say, we now know what they're doing? How did you start getting to the point where, like, your initial vision, how did you start telling the fans, hey, go to the concession stand on 112 and not 114? Like, what was those next steps?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. And so once we had we call these internal findings, and the only way to fix it was to tell the fans.
Yep.
And so at this point in time, mobile strategy had very low adoption in the NBA on mobile applications. In-game mobile adoption.
Yep.
I think it was just south of 3%. And so we said, we're not going to move people that way, because 3% of 18,000 people at most is not a lot of people.
Yep.
And so that's when we had the idea. Actually, it was at the SEAT conference at a bar with our CTO and our COO. We said, what about digital signage? Because you don't need an app to look at it, so you don't need to opt in. And it's what people are used to seeing on the roads every day.
Yep.
Stop signs, stop lights, so on and so forth. And so at that point in time, we then, formulated the solution of our digital signage located outside of vomitories. So there's that critical decision-making point. Am I going left or am I going right?
Yep.
Because arenas are ovals, so you don't know what's around the corner. So we said we have to inform them right then and there, which is outside the vomitories. And so that's when our digital signage came to life to say, let's show fans what's around the corner in each direction. And so that was the birth of the first part of the fan experience, which was our digital signage component.
Yep, and so it is just works in a traffic light system. It's a green signal to go to that one, amber that it's starting to fill up, and red. It's a long wait, and you didn't have to really reinvent the wheel there.
No, and it's a little bit more than just green, yellow, red. It's
Yep.
actually it divided up into 100 increments, and it goes 33, 33, 33.
Yep.
So something can be red or yellow, but how red or how yellow is it?
Yep.
So, and we're always comparing what we call as dynamic thresholding. We're always comparing each measurable area against each other in real time. So we're always pointing the fans in the direction of least resistance at all times, no matter how busy the area is.
And so from your key customer point of view, your stadium operator that is wanting the best fan experience, what's their experience with the product in looking at the total stadium on what's happening, where are people, which concession is under stress, like what's the control room sort of dashboard look from their point of view?
Yeah, so we actually give them what we call our operations dashboard on a series of Microsoft Surface tablets, and they can also put this information on a PC as well, where they can actually pull up from our stadium view any concession line, restroom line, or retail, and that view above the line with our interpreted artificial intelligence. So what they're able to do now is they can set threshold alerts with our data. And so they actually will call in to their portable beer and concession hawkers to say, go line bust at section 202, 207, and 150, because they're the longest lines. so they can increase per cap that way, which we've proven out.
Yep.
And also, we were able to, from a operational standpoint, we're able to identify deficiencies of offline point of sale terminals and things like that were causing throughput issues.
Yep.
That we were able to identify with our system. So I would say those two keys right there, those two findings have been the most effective from an operational standpoint. They're able to now restaff and reshuffle resources in real time based off of real data.
Yeah, and effectively you're doing like preventive customer service. You're not waiting for someone to send a tweet to the stadium to say, oh my God, this beer line in Bay 34 is getting smashed. They already know it. They know
Correct.
It's coming up. Someone's coming up, and to a certain degree, it can be starting to predict it because you're doing it when it's in amber or when it's hitting 70. You're getting alert, and you're not letting it to get to 90 as a type of is sort of how your dashboard works.
That is correct, and also one thing to mention here is all the data that we're gathering every second, real time line counts, serve times, and wait times. We're able to now use that data, as you say, predictively to basically formulate schematics of different events, whether it be an NBA game or a concert or an event of something that's separate. We're able to have now these schematic designs to say, we know that this is going to happen at this point in time, therefore we are going to prepare for it because of the predictive data that we have now from wait time.
I think it was, again, another case study talking to some of the people at the Palace. It even started giving the ability to transform the stadium a little bit. I think they had a country music concert, and there's more women that turn up to a country music concert. The wait time, the data showed that the lines were ridiculous. And so that what they did with following concerts is they actually converted some of the men's restrooms to women's restrooms to alleviate that stress because there's more women turning up to the concert. But that's something that just would have been accepted because you didn't have the data, and you just would have had disgruntled, fans saying, "Oh, we've got to wait in line," and like your Red Wings experience, miss part of the concert because they weren't able to satisfy. But when you've got the data, you can make that switch to say, we're taking out 25% of the male restrooms and converting them to female restrooms just for this case.
That's exactly right. And also, one thing that they're able to do with our dashboard and our operations tool is they're able to actually switch over men's restrooms to women's restrooms, and they can reflect them on the signs.
Yep.
So immediately, the traffic patterns can be diverted, and that can happen in real time or before the event. So, they can easily go there and know that that's switched over. And it can be measured effectively that way.
And your F&B guys have I've been in the frustration of being in a line and someone gets to the front of the line and they haven't decided what they want, and then they're looking at they're doing the looking at the menu. Have they has there been analysis of what they're doing from a menu choice point of view and how that affects lines and those kind of things that also have sort of come out from what you're studying?
Yes. A lot of the food and beverage companies that we work with keep a lot of this stuff internal.
Yep.
But we have worked with a lot of collaborative ones that were able to share what they're able to do. So actually, menu item changing is one thing where they say this item here is causing throughput issues. Let's disperse it so we have more load balancing, equilibrium. But also what they're doing and what they did at the Palace is spoilage, which is really interesting. So spoilage at a certain venue was at around 17%. And so what they did was they said, okay, they pushed out a special to say, okay, $2, 2-for-1 hot dogs or what have you, based off of the crowd conditions and where people are going and where people are. So they were actually able to reduce that spoilage by 5% just in a half a season.
Okay.
So they're getting really innovative and progressive with the use of our data in real time.
And so you're in. So your initial install was at the Palace, and now you're in a bunch of NBA arenas and a bunch of stadiums in the US, and then also in my part of the world in Australia. Has there been lessons in going from different markets on how stadiums are built, how fans move? Has there been any lessons going into different markets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're constantly learning and evolving and, customizing our product. And one thing that we've learned is, especially in Australia too, as you know, in your part of the world, there are so many different, for example, let's use the MCG in Melbourne.
Yep.
They have areas that people can't go in because they're not members.
Yep.
It's not a continuous circle. So we had to adjust our signage. So you can't go to the left because, that's members only. So we had to adjust that to, we had parallel of the concourse signage. Okay. So in terms of all these different markets we've gone into, the way that the behavior of the fans unfolded, we were able to adapt to that to, we're not trying to say, hey, behave this way because our system is designed this way. It was the complete opposite. You behave this way and you're not going to change your behavior in terms of what you're used to. So let's adapt to that to then, expand on your experience at the venue. So to answer your question in a long-winded way is yes, absolutely. And we will continue to always do that with every market that we go into, big time.
Yeah. And so then who is your, so when you've got a product like this in the sports technology space, which is why, we keep crossing paths, and I see you at SEAT because you're talking to the CTOs and the stadium guys. Who's your primary customer? Because it's one of those ones where it does provide benefits to a lot of different people across the stadium experience. But where do you start your conversations when you're talking to a stadium or a team or a F&B provider? Like where does the conversation start for you, and effectively who's your primary customer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we first started, it was we started with the chief technology officers.
Yep.
Because we're selling technology, chief technology officers. That's how we thought it was going to go.
Yep.
That ended up being a very long process because, as what you said, the good thing about wait time, and also I guess the negative thing is it affects a lot of different departments.
Yep.
In an organization. So what we do now is, because of how many fans look at our system, there is a big sponsorship play, a net new sponsorship play. So what we're doing these days is we're talking to the director of corporate partnerships to say, this is our system, and they see immediately how they can make money off of it through sponsorship.
Yep.
And we actually can help them do that. We can help sell them. We actually have a head of brand partnerships now. So that's now where we start, which is rendered itself to be more effective because they can create money right off the bat from our system in terms of revenue, as opposed to it's a much harder sell for a CTO to go to his leadership to say, this is a cost, as opposed to a director of corporate partnerships to say, this is a revenue center.
Yep.
So that's the shift that we have now. But ultimately, it's an ownership decision, but corporate partnerships, if it's, we can create revenue off this immediately, it changes the conversation to be much faster decision-making.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can, on the digital signage and have inventory there and push it in the app and say, this is brought to you by a certain partner. That's why you're getting your beer quicker. That should make you happy. That's pretty much the pitch from a partnerships point of view.
Correct. And also activation. So it's not necessarily just about, hey, here's the logos and all that kind of stuff brought to you by.
Yep.
That's the start of it.
Yep.
But it's activation. So financial partners with card holder benefit activations to card holder acquisition activations. There's all kinds of different activations that all these different sponsorship, whether it be the brokers or the brands themselves, are trying to get across to the consumers. And so they can activate it on our system because we're completely dynamic and flexible with the way it's broadcasted. But it's because we have the captive attention of people, because honestly, at the end of the day, who likes to wait in line?
Yeah. Yeah. And so from a business model point of view, is there is there a bit of capex and a bit of opex in that? There's that install and setup, getting cameras and getting dashboards set up, and making sure you've got the nuances of the stadium and that kind of thing. And then is it a subscription going forward to keep upkeep and maintain that system? Is that how it is from a stadium's point of view?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a capex off the bat, which is hardware.
Yep.
And so wait time, doesn't make money on that at all. We can actually get pretty creative on that in terms of getting our system in. We just want to get in there.
Yep.
And then once we do get in there, we do have an OpEx, which is a subscription. So think of it like an alarm system.
Yep.
And then you pay monthly, where then it's integrated within all IPTV, on digital screens, on the mobile app, and the data analysis that we provide. That's all part of the subscription. And on the OpEx, and the OpEx is where the sponsorship people say, okay, we can make money off the OpEx on this.
Yep.
And so that's where we can either revenue share, they can just pay us our licensing and they sell all the sponsorship, or there's a blended opportunity as well.
Okay. And so you're pretty much in, expansion, and is getting in his goal is to get in as many stadiums as possible right now.
Yeah, so initially we didn't want to grow too fast, so we kind of kept a cap on our scaling.
Yep.
We only wanted to be in a few arenas and stadiums because we wanted to make sure we did it right. You have one shot, usually, to execute on technology, because obviously this industry is so small. Even though it's large, it's small.
Yep.
And so we wanted to make sure we did it the right way. But along the way, we started to, as we were perfecting the product, we also forged some very significant relationships with partners like Cisco, PMY, IBM, and some other big companies so when we were ready to, I would say, for lack of a better phrase, pour some kerosene and gasoline on the fire, we had a plan in place to do so. And so once the product was proven, with all cylinders of ROI and scalability, at this point now, we're strategically growing in terms of the property acquisition. So a lot of that has to do with market placement and strategic partners who are also in those venues who might be scalable as well.
And from a scaling point of view, I mean, the sports space is super exciting, gets you into a lot of great venues. I'm sure you've seen a ton of ball games, but the application of wait time works on a whole bunch of different places, whether it be malls or airports. Is that something that's potentially down the track that says, cool, our system's working, we can roll it out in those type of scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with the sports industry. So the sports industry is very exciting. It's a lot of publicity. It's a lot of glitz and glam, which is great. But what that did for us in terms of our strategy was it allowed us to get our name out there.
Yep.
Hey, wait time is a thing. It works. We're patented, which is exciting. And so it allowed us to get our name out there. But also at the same time, I wasn't, kind of disregarding opportunities in other markets. We just wanted to remain as laser focused as possible.
Yep.
But also connecting dots along the way.
Yep.
So in my peripherals, this entire time from when I started wait time to present day, we do have a lot of opportunities with, as you just said, airports to malls to, concert festivals to temporary spaces to convention centers. And so we're starting to explore some of those now. We just don't want to have to spend a lot of time on custom development with our software to do that. We want to have it to be a 10-degree shift of our software as opposed to a 90-degree shift, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, it makes complete sense. I want to go into the Sports Geek Closing 5 with Zack Klima from Wait Time. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yes, I do. It was the Rose Bowl. As a child, I grew up in California.
Yep.
And so it was a Rose Bowl game. I was born in 1988, so I believe it was in 1993.
Okay. Very cool. And you would, like I said, you would have been to a fair few sports events now, especially over the last 8 or 9 years. Has been working on wait time. Do you have a favourite crazy food memory at a sports event, or a go-to food?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to is, I'm a very simple eater when it comes to the sports games. Hot dogs, pretzels. But I will tell you, my favorite food experience was at the MCG.
Yep.
And the MCG folks, when we went live there, they took me to I believe, a very famous steakhouse within the MCG, and we were watching Hawthorne play, I think, Collingwood at the MCG.
Yep.
And it was the most remarkable food experience I've ever had at a sports venue, hands down.
Hopefully my Magpies got up in that one, but yeah, that's not normally how I go with my dining at the footy, but it is a different experience, I'm sure. And that's why, very different experience. Very different. What's the first app you open in the morning? Email. 100%. Yeah. The managing global clients from around the world. You're just trying to see what fire you have to put out when you wake up in the morning. Yeah, I mean, something along those lines. I mean, I know, Australia is 14 hours ahead of us. So, there's a lot of 2 a.m. emails, 3 a.m. emails that, I've learned to operate on 4 hours of sleep a night. Yep. I would say is my sweet spot. Yeah, definitely. Is there someone that you have followed or read or have worked with that you suggest the podcast listeners should follow, and why? Yeah, absolutely. So the first and foremost is one of our biggest champions of wait time. His name is Matthew Jafarian. He's the executive vice president of business at the Miami Heat. Yep. He was an integral part of a software startup called Funware about 10 years ago. And he exited, and he's now with the Miami Heat. And he is completely revolutionizing the mobile experience and the technology experience at the Miami Heat. And he's been our biggest, I would say initially started off as a skeptic, but then right now he's one of my very close friends in the industry and one of our biggest champions. So I would say Matthew Jafarian with the Miami Heat. People should very much so study him. Well, I will get you his details and we'll put him in the show notes. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? What's your go-to? Yeah, my go-to is Instagram. I would say Facebook and Twitter are great. We have a little bit of a following on there, but I would say that I can tell the reason why I like Instagram is I can tell my personal story along with the company story at the same time, intermingled successfully. And we have a bigger following on there, so I would say Instagram is my go-to for sure. And so, lastly, how can people get in touch with you on the internet? What are the best platforms to get in touch with you if people want to talk about wait time? I would say that the best one is going through our website, so they can educate themselves with some visual case studies and to see our technology live. Just because that's the power of it. You have to see it. Yep. And then my contact details are directly on the website, so they can call or text me at any time. So thewaittimes.com would be the website you're sending everyone to? That is correct, thewaittimes.com. All right. And I will also put links to Zach's LinkedIn account. If you send him an invite, please tell him that you listen to the podcast and you want to chat about wait time. Zach, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I very much so do. And next time you're in my part of the world and you're going to the MCG, let me know and we'll catch up for a beer. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there next month with Paul Yeomans. You know Paul? Yes. So I'll be there with him, and then I think Greg from the MCG and some other ones. We're doing a little sales tour. Okay. And we just went live at Sydney Cricket Ground this past week, actually. Yep. So we were going to do a big case study there. So I would say Sydney and Melbourne
I'll be there in the near future. And so, I will definitely get in contact with you, and we should have a couple beers.
Definitely. Well, you know that Zack has done business in Melbourne because you are pronouncing it correctly, and I think it was one of my early recommendations when you started asking about what about this cricket ground. I said the first thing you got to do is make sure you say it as Melbourne and not the mispronunciation of Melbourne that sometimes happens. So you've obviously been appropriately taught to say it correctly. So I look forward to catching up with you in Melbourne when you're here next.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you telling me that, and having some beers at the dive bar in my town over in Ferndale. And you're like, hey, whatever you do, don't say Melbourne because you sound like a stupid American. And I'm like, oh, thank you very much.
I'd never say stupid American. That's never passed my lips. But yes, that is my advice.
My own words.
That is my advice.
My own words.
That is my advice to everyone. Thank you very much, Zack. Look forward to catching up and appreciate coming on the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Zack. You can send him a tweet, Zack Klima, Z or Z for my American friends, AZKKLIMA on Twitter, or you can connect with him on LinkedIn. A lot of my guests are open and available, ready to connect on LinkedIn. Just send him a message. Say, listen to the podcast. If you want more info on wait time, you can go to thewaittimes.com and reach out. Ask Zack how wait time might be useful for your stadium or how your team could activate in a stadium that has wait time. Before I wrap up this episode, I want to give a little bit of an esports update. It's probably causing a little bit of the intermittent publishing of podcasts at the minute, trying to keep up the schedule of weekly podcasts, but occasionally missing a few. And thank you for sticking with us. So just give you a bit of an update on all things SG Esports. Our esports business is pretty much being driven on three key pillars: sponsorship, which is very similar to the world of sport. We're applying the digital to dollars process on the content that we're creating, whether it be Tuesday Takeaways, our weekly player show that's on Instagram, game day interviews and post-game interviews and the like, and working on new content franchises or developing content pieces with brands and partners that want to connect with an esports audience. Also, when this episode comes out, if you go to gravitas.gg, which is the website for our team in the OPL, we'll be very, very close to launching our membership product. I'm not going to give all the details away right now because I want to leave a little bit of tease, but I will break down what we're trying to do in the membership space. It's pretty unique in that it doesn't really fit alongside a sport product. We don't have 11 games or 22 games or 41 games and tickets to sell, but we're looking to engage that esports and gamer audience that want to identify with the team, want to be hanging out with cool merch, want to be part of an exclusive club, and also how we can connect with them at our major event, which is the Melbourne Esports Open, happening down here in Melbourne at Rod Laver Arena. I'm hopeful that the Gravitas boys will pick up the performance and will be on the main stage at Rod Laver Arena at the end of August. If you're in Melbourne and you want to check out what esports really is, please come along. Hit me up. I will make sure that you can come and check out what we're doing from a Gravitas booth point of view and meet some of the players. And stay tuned for the end of this podcast. I'm bringing back Sounds of the Game with the sounds of an Aussie esports crowd at a recent Sydney event, the Intel Extreme Masters. It's quite funny to hear that crowd and then also see some of the commentary happening around AFL games and the police and political correctness and fans being told not to cheer too loud. We're definitely not seeing that in esports, and it's definitely a concern for me as a long-time loud fan at sports venues. I think we need to make sure that we don't go overboard in trying to correct and police fan behaviour, especially if you're just cheering with your team. But at the moment, that is not a problem in the world of esports. If you want to keep in touch with what we're doing in esports and also educate yourself on the esports space, we've got a newsletter similar to Sports Geek News, but completely focused on esports. It comes out every fortnight. That's Fortnite every 2 weeks, not Fortnite the game, obviously. SGEsports.com is where you can sign up for that. And also, if you're interested in membership and understanding and joining in the journey that is Gravitas, please sign up for the newsletter, gravitas.gg, and you'll be in the first to know when we launch our membership product. I'd love to see some Gravitas jerseys and some Gravitas membership hoodies worn by listeners all around the world. That would be absolutely amazing from my point of view. So that's it for the esports update. If you ever want any info or any help in that space, we're starting to develop an esports and gaming workshop for sports teams to understand where they fit, how they can enter the space, whether it is similar to what teams like the Adelaide Crows have done and the Bombers have done in buying a team, but also what can they do if they're not going down that path of investment? How could they engage that audience, and how that audience is different? What a product might look for that audience, and also what we've learned so far in what they engage with, how they engage on platforms, how they engage on different platforms like Twitch. So if you're a business or a team that wants to at least have a better understanding of the world of esports, I'm happy to show you all of our scars and some of the things that we've learnt. Please get in touch. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com can run those sessions in person or via GoToMeeting. You might actually want to use a Pick My Brain session for this kind of thing. Pick My Brain session is a 2-hour consult via GoToMeeting where it can be any topic you choose. So if that topic is how do we do esports, or what should we do on TikTok, or how do we go and sell this campaign and sell more tickets from a membership point of view, or how do we tweak our Facebook campaign, I could keep ordering this for a long while yet, but it's really you get to choose. So if you don't know, you can simply send me a link, send me an email and say, what could we do? But if you know what you want to do and you just want to get on a call and use me as a sounding board and get my advice on a few different things, you can simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. It allows you to book in the time, pay the money, and we prep, and 2 hours of a great session. You get a full recording and transcript of the session and some follow-up work. So done it a few times. It's found to be really effective if you just want to have a bit of a brainstorm on a bunch of different things, and we can have a really good chat about what you want to do. Until next episode, as always, you can contact me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Follow our League of Legends esports team at gravitas.gg. For more resources, go to sportsgeekhq.com. Looking for new campaign ideas to drive new and fresh data and leads? Contact Sean to find out how SportsGeek can help you drive fans into your stadium. It's all about the cheeks in the seats.